Okay. So, welcome to season 2 of the Ladies Fixing the World. I'm really nervous. I'm just gonna say it because I think that's better. I'm very much more excited to record a new season with a new group of amazing unschooling women that I am so fortunate to know. Um, yeah, I was walking back through Krakow this evening, almost running to make it. And I felt so humbled by the fact that I was going home to have this conversation with these wise women. I have Sandra Dodd here. Welcome, Sandra. I think most unschoolers know about Sandra already, and if they don't, they should definitely Google her. I read your book 100 years ago, or I read parts of a lot of books when I started my journey. It was a great journey. I'm so happy that I got to know you on the other podcast, and now we're here. And I have Sue Elvis also from the podcast. We became friends. It's been so lovely to get to know you. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm really excited too.
And yeah, it's just so lovely that we get to have these
Good.
conversations. I decided and I agreed with Sandra to give her the talking stick to start the theme of the day. So here you go, Sandra.
Well, I think we have two themes, but first, definitions.
Yes.
Definition of unschooling. It's hard. It was years. I was unschooling for years before I had a definition I was really happy with. And the one that's in the book that you read a long time ago, it's a little expanded from that. But I've never dealt with anything in my whole life that's so hard to understand as unschooling. Even for people who really want to get it, it takes a year. They can get a glimpse and they can try it, but they can't really understand it. And so in the early years, we would just say we don't use a curriculum, or we play. We just learn by being around things and doing things and running around. And also for me, when it was new, I was able to say it's like the open classroom, because where I lived and when I lived, the open classroom was a concept that a lot of people knew about from either having gone to university and studied education, or from being in New Mexico and Albuquerque specifically. There were schools that were set up like that. So it was a vague idea. They kind of knew what it was. It didn't work in schools very well, but it works at home really well. So that was easier for me personally to be able to say it's like the open classroom. But I was wondering what you guys had said, or what you say now, or maybe how that developed, because used to be people would say, what's your elevator speech? What do you say if somebody asks you and you only have 30 seconds or a minute?
Mm.
I don't know.
I I I don't know what I would say in an elevator, but I know what I very often say, and that is if people try to ask me, so what does that really mean, unschooling? Then I ask them if they have 3 or 4 hours to listen. So when you said a year, I thought, yeah, that's actually smarter, but at least 3 or 4 hours if you've never heard about it before.
That won't work in an elevator unless the electricity's.
No, a definition. Oh, dang it.
Well, we
Mm?
started with kids are naturally curious, so they'll learn all they need to know when they need to know it. But I don't think that barely scrapes the surface. And as you're saying, Sandra, a year. Well, we're many, many years down this track, and you said it's hard to define. It's something I can't remember your exact words, but I find it so deep, and that even years later, I'm understanding a little bit more about the way of life we've chosen to live. And so a little bare definition with one or two sentences, really something good to start with, but it's an amazing journey digging deeper and understanding it more. And I think you're quite right. You can't understand it I'll give it 2 weeks, I'll give it a month. And sometimes people say that I'll try unschooling for a term. And I think, how can you do that? Because it took me a long, long time to realize such things as I had this idea that kids would parents couldn't interfere with their children's learning, that kids were curious, that if you stepped out of the way and let your kids get on with it, they would learn everything they needed to know in the time when they needed to know it. But I thought that meant that I had to keep hands off. And it took me a long time. Well, we went off on other tracks because I thought, I can't do that. I'm itching to tell my kids about Shakespeare or whatever. I want to invite them to do things with me. And I thought, I can't do that because we're going to be unschoolers. So yeah, that's where we started. And these days, my definitions have got a lot more complicated. And yeah, as you say, you'll sit down all day trying to explain it. But I think it's got a lot to do with, I would pull in the words love and respect and trust, freedom, but all together. And a new one yesterday I picked up when I had another unschooling discussion. A word I'd like to make my own is invitation. Because we all love to be invited.
Early on, I used to say it was like a lifetime of Saturdays.
Yeah.
That only makes sense in the context of school.
Because Sandra, I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that line that about the Saturdays, it really resonated with me, and I've passed that on and I've written about it. I always quote you. I always put your name, that's where it came from. But I think that's a wonderful image of unschooling.
It is for people who went to school. But for unschoolers themselves, they're like, what's the big deal about Saturday?
I actually have a child who still can't do the weekdays unless he really focuses. And we talked about it recently. I'm not going to share which one it is, but I mean, none of mine are young any longer. So they should they know the weekdays? I would have expected them to know the weekdays. But what he said was, it makes no difference to me.
Right, right.
I know the months. I know the seasons. I know where I am. I know what time it is. I don't care if it's Sunday or Tuesday. I don't care. It never made any difference to me. They've never been in any courses. They had to go every Wednesday or whatever. So yeah, it's just a lifetime of Saturdays makes sense to people who went to school. But it's a little bit cheating because Saturdays, I've had a lot of inquiries of people who wanted to make documentaries about our life.
Right.
And the problem is you can edit it either way. It could very easily look like we're on vacation all the time. And are we? Maybe, but we're not vacating.
That's the problem. That's the problem with explaining it, because you start explaining it and then you come to the place where it doesn't work with this audience, or it doesn't work with unschooling. So it sort of tips, and then you need a new definition. It's hard. It's really hard. And I've worked with a lot of journalists who wanted to really interview somebody in depth, and they wanted to really understand it. And they would spend hours on the phone with me, and maybe a couple of days or more with a family, and they still mess it up because it's not enough time. That's not enough time. And so those people wanted to get it. They really wanted to do the most, neutral, great article. But I haven't seen anybody really succeed at that. And families who have been unschooling for a year, and Sue, you were saying you went a long time on a tangent that you came off of too, about not helping them very much. Even people who are trying to live it are working back and forth at first. It's like, oh, too far this way, too far that way. Still trying to find a good rhythm and a good calm place where they don't wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I just saw a little video about South Koreans liking American accents when they're learning English, which is fine. I think it's it's more in line with the spelling, maybe. We say our R's. Ireland and the United States have some R's. But there was an Australian man who was being interviewed about it, and he was living in South Korea, and he said, when I went, I started using my internal R's so people could understand me, so South Koreans could understand my English. And I went home and told my mom, it's so nice to be back in Perth. And she said, what? Because he didn't use his own accent when he was back in Australia. Perth.
That's funny.
Well, okay, definition.
Do you think that a lot of people want to know a definition so they know whether they're unschooling properly or not?
Or
That
so they even know
people,
if they want to.
or whether there are some people out there who, like the keepers of the definition, and they want to say, well, you're unschooling and you're not. I've come across a lot of people say, but you're not unschooling, when people say, I'm an unschooler. And it's very off-putting. And I wonder if that's why we need it. Well, why? I don't think it's easy to define, but to have a starting point. And does it really matter how we define it? Isn't it just how our lives are lived out? And that will look differently for all of us.
Yes,
I think I
but
need it when people ask me the question.
right.
So how do you educate your children? And I say I don't. And then the eyebrows go behind the hairline. And then we start having a conversation. And it would be very nice to be able to, in a short lift elevator way, to say what I'm doing. I would also sometimes need it when I think the concept becomes too open, and I like it to be quite open. I don't like defining other people and telling them they're not really unschooling. But if you have a little bell and you have a curriculum and a stack of books, and you have 3 hours set aside a day, the parents deciding what the children are doing and what workbooks, I think it would be pushing it to call that unschooling. So somewhere between the radical not assisting at all and the sitting at the kitchen table for 3 hours or 5 hours a day is a line. And sometimes when I discuss this theme with other people, I'd like to know where that line is, or to be able to discuss, when do we venture out? When are we not failing, but not doing unschooling? Where's the, yeah, I've had that problem a few times, and I've also gotten into trouble pointing at it, saying, could we discuss the lines? Yeah.
For me, it doesn't matter whether people unschool or not. They come read my stuff or they're in discussion with me and they go away. I don't care what they do. I'm not keeping track of them. You know, I've never had a sign-up sheet and we're going to check back with you every 5 years. Nothing like that. I was accused of running a cult one time, and Deb Lewis said, this is a cult, you're really bad at it. Because I don't ask for money, and I don't have meetings, and I don't know who's there and who's not. But within a discussion, if there's an ongoing discussion and someone comes and starts giving advice who isn't an unschooler, then it matters to me. Because we're in the, maybe not this discussion, but like the old discussions that I used to do, mailing lists, writing. Because it's going to be there, because the things that they said are going to be sitting there permanently like everybody else's stuff. So then at that point, it may be worth saying, this advice that you're giving can be a problem for people who are trying to get unschooling. So that's the way I would do it, is like, this piece of advice won't lead people more toward unschooling. So it wasn't you yourself are not being an unschooler. It was like, wait, we need to aim more toward this, giving kids choices.
I'm a completely different person than I was before we started along this pathway. And we could define it more as, I am more respectful, I listen, I value my kids' interests, I'm willing to trust them, and I could make a long list of things. I look at my kids with wonder and awe instead of problems before they were a problem. Well, not a problem as such, but kids begin to feel like they're a problem when we continually thinking about, are they going to get a job in the future? Have they got the right qualifications? Are we along the right pathway? And then we could just look at them and say, wow, they're such wonderful people with so many talents. They're going to do all right in the world. I'm going to give them the opportunity to be themselves. And so if we start with ourselves, we could write a totally different definition of unschooling.
You've given me a lead in to share my favorite definition, but I want to say that on my website, I have at least 30 definitions
Oh, great.
that were good from one time or another. Like I have 3 pages of collections of different people's. One of the pages is somebody else collected. Ren Allen collected years ago, but I saved that when it lost its home. What I ended up with, my personal favorite, is about the parents. It's more about what the parents do. Unschooling is creating and maintaining an atmosphere in which natural learning can flourish.
Yeah.
So that's what parents do, create and maintain that atmosphere. But that's going to involve giving kids choices. It's going to involve things that the kids do, or that you've arranged a space and a time for the kids to do these things. But creating and maintaining an atmosphere in which natural learning can flourish. I didn't ever improve on that one once I came to it, but I'd been doing it for probably 15 years by the time I came to that one.
And then from that definition, you could go lots of different ways. That's just the beginning. You can come into creating that atmosphere. Well, telling kids not valuing kids' interests wouldn't fit into that framework. Telling kids what to do won't fit into that framework. Working towards a future goal, which may or may not be what the kids want, that doesn't fit into that framework. I like that, Sandra. It's I might go and copy that one out, because I was blogging for years before I actually wrote a post called "What is Unschooling" on my blog. And I found it just so difficult to do that. I thought it was better just to write about what it is. And it's like instead of telling somebody what it is, show them what it is. And then I needed a what is unschooling, an article for my book. And I thought, I can't write a book and not actually have a definition. So I started Googling other people's ideas. What is unschooling? And all these things coming up. And I'm thinking, well, they could describe it that way or this way or that way. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. But yes, pinning myself down to just a couple of lines was very, very difficult. But I like that, Sandra. I'm going to go and copy that one. Not copy it as my own, but share it with other people as yours.
The definition page can be in the show links, maybe.
Yes, it can. Let's put it there.
That's a great idea.
For years,
so when people say what is unschooling, we'll say, well, go to Sandra Dodd's page and you'll know exactly what it is. And that will save us.
And then they'll come to a really, really long page of all the discussion and definitions with links to other pages of definitions.
And they'll get stuck in the rabbit hole and they won't appear for days, but they'll have a fantastic time exploring unschooling.
I think if you understand, like if you want to be an expert in puppies, you want to advise people on how to take care of puppies or whatever, you have to have really known a lot of puppies, hundreds. If the only dog you ever had you got when it was grown, you don't know anything about puppies. If you've had one puppy or one batch of puppies, you can't advise about puppies. You only know those puppies. But if you read a lot of people's definitions, that might be like a big bunch of puppies. I don't know.
No, but it's zooming in on it, because it is very hard to define what it is. But if you get a lot of different angles and perspectives, then maybe you can wrap your head a little bit around it. I was thinking defining unschooling in a way is also very much talking about what it's not. For me, it's a centerpiece that it's actually not about education. It's not about learning. For me, one of the things that was really, I remember as a turning point in my understanding very early on, was that learning is a byproduct of living. So if we live with enthusiasm, we get to unfold who we are. We get to explore our passions and do the things that we really, that makes us want to get out of bed in the morning. It will never be about learning.
I disagree.
Well,
because you're learning what your passions are. You're learning what you like. You're learning who you are.
I'm not doing it to learn. I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it. I'm doing it because I love doing it. I'm not doing it to improve my Spanish skills or my English literature level or anything like that. I'm doing it because it makes me happy, or because I'm curious, or because I'm because it makes me able to solve some problems that I'm actually having.
It may be that it's possible that your definition of learning, when you say it's not about learning, you're thinking of academic learning, because I'm not.
I'm thinking about learning being the goal of the activity.
Okay.
And to me,
I think learning is inevitable in any
exactly.
activity.
You can't not learn.
Say not learning. Sometimes people say unschooling has been happening since caveman days.
Yeah.
That's unschooling is what there is without school. I don't believe that. We wouldn't need it. If you look at history, even the past 100, 150, 200 years, a lot of kids didn't go to school. They just did whatever job their parents did. They learned on the job to be whatever their parents did, or they would apprentice them out to somebody else to learn what they did, or girls would just learn how to do home things. That's not unschooling. That's living when school really didn't exist. But unschooling is a replacement for school. School does exist. All the countries we're from, because there's nobody here from India, require school. There's some sort of compulsory schooling. They used to say compulsory education, but after schools got sued for the kids graduating without being able to read well, they said, okay, let's rephrase compulsory attendance. Yeah, whatever. But still, there's compulsion.
That's a good point, though.
So yeah, so if we're going to opt out of that, we need to legally and morally and ethically replace it with something as good or better. So when an unschooling family says, oh, I don't care if my kids learn, or we're not about learning, or it's not about learning, or somebody who had been unschooling a long time said one time, when I said, when we have a choice, I either do what's new or what's comforting. If I can't decide, I go with what produces the most learning. And he said, I didn't think you should talk about learning. And I said, what? I didn't get his objection. And yet he used the word education a lot of times. So that's another reason to read all the definitions you can find and decide which ones make sense to you or that appeal to you. Because I think we have an obligation to, at least out of the corners of our eyes, see that our kids are learning. Because
Cecilia, sorry to interrupt, Sandra.
No,
I'm just saying,
it's a replacement for school.
Yeah, Cecilia's life isn't ordinary. It's full of learning opportunities. So you probably don't have to think too much about things that maybe I thought about. Am I helping my kids expand their interests and their passions? Are our days interesting? But Cecilia, your whole life is your kids are learning on the go, because you're living a life that is full of learning opportunities. Whereas I always thought that unschooling could be about living life, but only when life is interesting. At other times, I needed to go out there and listen carefully, strew, make invitations to help my kids learn what they wanted to learn. But do you find that your life as on the road, visiting all these beautiful places and having conversations with people, learning other languages just because you need it, do you find you sometimes sit down and think about particular passions of your kids that you feel the need to help them with, that you're going to direct some energy and some resources, some conversation, whatever, for a particular child who is particularly interested in something, despite your life being very interesting?
I have a whole list of things I feel like saying right now. I might get very confused. Yes. And yeah, my life looks very interesting because I travel. And it is. It's the life I want to live. That's why I'm living it. But I think I have the same, I mean, I just borrowed a big keyboard piano kind of thing that was really annoying when I was driving from England to Poland in the van, because one of my kids started playing that. So that's like a very practical example of me having to do something to keep up with what my kids want to do. I always have to talk to them about their passions or ideas about what they want to do, and it's very often going in 3 different directions. I have the habit of inviting more people. And right now I have 5 teenagers with me, and they're going. Fortunately, they share passions, but it is a thing we have to give some attention. Of course, in a way, it's very easy to be an unschooler when you're also traveling, because everyone can see that they will be exposed to a lot of different things, and they don't have the option of going to a regular school because they're never in the same place for more than a month. So I don't get a lot of questioning because it looks on the surface very amazing. It has its struggles I mean, it's not always strawberries. And I also think you had a very fair point, Sandra, saying that we have to pay attention to the learning, and that we can't just say we live as if school doesn't exist, because it does exist, and we opted out on purpose, and we know it exists, and actually it often gets in the way of the life I want to live, because, for example, there are not a lot of children available to hang out with because they're all in the schools. There are many things that where the fact that everyone else's schooling is becoming part of our life when we opt out of it, and it's giving us fewer choices. Sometimes it's opening up doors, but often it's closing doors. My point of saying that we don't do things to learn, the learning is not the goal, learning is the byproduct, is that we do things because we're passionate, we do things because we're curious, we do things because we need to do them. That would be probably the 3 main reasons. But I've put thought into this before I started doing it. And I am convinced my children are getting a way better education than they could ever get in a school situation.
And it's a good definition.
Well, I think it changes the perspective. It's not about learning a language. It's about getting the potatoes at the market in Poland. You know, how do you pay for them? How do you ask for them? So I wish I could remember the word for potatoes, because 2 of the teenagers have been shouting that word all afternoon. And if I was a little bit smarter, it would have been stuck in here, but it's not.
My son.
Yes, your son being one of them. Yeah. He's the passionate potato peeler in the group. So he was getting potatoes, and they had to learn the word, him and my daughter, and they've been having a lot of fun with the word, because the guy at the market apparently made a little dance teaching them the word. Well, side story. So, but anyway, it's not about, I don't, oh man, double, triple negation. I don't not care about their education. I am just convinced it will be so much better if the focus, the reason we do things is not education. It's not because we want to be smarter that we're reading Shakespeare. We're reading Shakespeare because it makes us laugh.
But that's why in my favorite definition, my current favorite definition, it says for natural learning to flourish, because they're learning about potatoes in Poland.
Yeah.
That's not on anybody's curriculum, not even Poland.
No.
So, yeah.
And will they ever need that word again, ever? I don't know.
There used to be a complaint that still comes up, and some of you have probably heard it and responded to it, but that is, I don't like the word unschooling. Unschooling is so negative. Why is it un? Because it's not schooling, because it's schooling not. But there's a page on my site that you can come through the definitions, which is the history of that word. John Holt named it because of a commercial, because of a 7-Up commercial. And it was 7-Up the Uncola. That was out when that was coming along. So he called it unschooling, which everybody who knew that commercial at the time, it was a really cool commercial. There's a copy of it on my site, a video. And so that was humorous. It was cute. It made sense. Like, boom, like 7-Up isn't cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyway, but
that needs to go in the show notes as well.
I heard that
as a direct link.
Pat Ferenga. Okay. Okay. Pat Ferenga told me that's why, but it made sense anyway, because it was those days, it was the 70s. So there was a definition or a little poetic thing written by Suzanne Carter. She goes by Zan Carter on Facebook, and she's in Indiana. I met her in 95. Several families got together, 8 families got together in Indiana. We drove a long way from here for that. And we stayed in one family had a big house. So it was the first thing that was anything like a conference I went to, but it was just for us to meet other unschoolers because there was nothing like that in those days in 95. So Zan wrote this. Lots of people make this point, but I never see the negation as negative in a value judgment sense when I use the word. To me, unschooling is as positive as unchaining, unbinding, unleashing, unfolding, unfurling, unlimiting. All mean freedom and growth and vast possibilities to me. And I will send that link.
Yeah, do it.
Ham Sarushian years later added to that list, she said, and unhurt, unharmed, undamaged, uninjured, uncontaminated, unimpaired, unspoiled, unprejudiced, and unbiased. So that, if you ever have people complain about unschooling now, I will send you the link to this and to the Uncola page.
Yeah,
It's sweet to think of the things that you're undoing or preventing from having happened in the first place by unschooling.
Yeah, we're not
Another thing people ask when they first are learning about unschooling is, will this work? And it's a weird question. What do you mean work? It's something that's almost impossible to discuss, because what they might mean by work is, will my kids go to the university? Or will my kids be happy and love me forever and ever and ever and always be happy that they weren't in school? You know, sometimes people want to guarantee, or sometimes in a discussion, if anybody in a discussion that I was running would say, take my word for it, I'd be like, put the brakes. Or I guarantee you that if you unschool, no, you can't. Based on what? What do you think? You going to give them their money back? What do you mean guarantee? You're not even there. Or I promise you that unschooling will give you this and that. And I will always stop them and go, you can't make any promises with these people. And they don't even know who they are. You don't even know who you're talking to. And you're saying, I guarantee, I promise. So that's a place that I stopped people right away, because it's a gamble. Everything in life is a gamble. If we save our money today instead of spending it, what if we both, my husband and I die tomorrow and we should have spent that money, our kids will go, good, they saved it because now we have it. But you know what I mean? I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, even physically or with life or with freedom or with your house. Your house could burn down. A tornado, well, we don't get tornadoes, but people who do, some sort of natural disaster could come and mess your house up. Or your RV. Sorry, I'm not wishing ill on your RV.
But I could say, I beat cancer almost 14 years ago. That was not fun, and that things can happen. The problem is that when we unschool, we take the responsibility back and we own it. If we send our kids to school, if it fails, it's the school's fault. If unschooling fails, it's our fault. And I think a lot of people have to get used to that feeling of, it's your child, so it's kind of your problem. And it was to begin with, and it will be if you put the child in school, but you just don't really realize that, or you kind of, it can be someone else's responsibility. It really is not.
That seems too much all or nothing, though, because there's even if your kids are in school, there's still parental responsibility,
exactly,
action, and contribution to that. But I think, although we can't guarantee that unschooling will work, we can tell stories. People can collect stories of, okay, there are some unschoolers who went to university, they did fine. There are some who didn't want to go to university and did fine. There are some who figured out that they would really rather have some trade that didn't require university, or started their own business, or lots of things. And so it's as bad as defining unschooling, I think, to talk about will it work and what's the guarantee, because I can't guarantee anything for anybody, but I can help them step more toward what feels safer and comfortable to them.
I also think I have a friend who would always say unschooling always works because there's no outcome. It can't go wrong. You have no, I mean, there's nothing that it has, there's no end point where you have to go. So wherever you end, it will be right. And she's right, but it's a little bit like the critique you gave me before, Sandra. She's right because she's done the work of thinking before that. What are my values? Why am I doing this? And there is an outcome of what kind of human beings do you want to put into this world? What kind of framework? What was your definition again, Sandra? To make the context where natural learning can flourish. So you want to let your children grow up in this specific context. But at the same time, I a little bit disagree. Can it go wrong? I think it can go wrong if you don't stop to think where or how why are you doing this? I put a lot of thought into what I said before, that I'm very sure that my children are getting a better education than they could ever get in a school system.
Because
Also,
you
if you
create that
think
environment.
academics and if you think about how to carry yourself and how to become emotionally mature and how to handle life and how to handle changing cultures, and it's not random what I'm doing. It's just I'm not shoveling anything down their throats. If I have the idea that you need to learn something and they're telling me, really, mom, I don't need that or I don't want that, I'm not pushing them. I'm just giving them the option. And if I have a strong opinion, I think everybody should learn this, then I share that opinion. But it's not foie gras. It's not geese with, I'm not doing that. Makes me think about, I don't know if it's in one of your many definitions, Sandra. I usually say that unschooling is very much about conversation. The only thing we consistently do is we talk. We talk so much. We talk all the time. I'm exhausted. I mean, it starts at 7 in the morning and I have to go to bed before the conversation ends, about all the things, all the people, all the impressions, so also what's happening. They're growing from being little babies until they are young adults, and they're still under your wings, and you process their emotions and you help them with their ideas. You get critique. I try to explain something and they're like, that's lame. I think you have old information and we have to look things up. And they're polite and nice, but I am often wrong and they will correct me. And then we have another conversation about that. And then it moves on and on and on. So is unschooling just one long conversation that takes about 20 years?
Longer.
Yeah.
My youngest turned 33,
Yeah.
and they're
Okay.
still kind of because there's no outcome, because there's no end, because I don't remember who said that unschooling can't fail because there's no outcome. That was you, Cecilia, said your friend said.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. When it seems to have failed, when the kids aren't glad that their parents unschooled them or whatever, it's easy to say, well, then they weren't really unschooling, but that's cheating. That's but I know some families in which it didn't do that well, but then I have to overlay that on the statistics, just in general. I don't mean numerical statistics, but on the range of people who go to school. So if you just think of all the people who went to government school, whatever it might be called, here it's called public school, but different places, different things. If they went to the regular local, this is the default school of our place, our state, our province, whatever, they don't all come out with an A. They can't. They physically can't. That's what A's mean. A's mean 10 or 15% of the people got this. And 15 or 20% of the people got a B, or whatever, however that grading system works. 40% have to fail. If they have no failures, the A's are worthless. And the A's are used to compete to get into other schools or whatever. And I don't know in the UK about GCSEs or O levels or whatever it might be. I don't think they have to have failures there, but they do. They must. There must be some people with higher scores than other people.
100%. Yeah, it's
And
done on
so,
yeah.
because you're competing to impress whoever you're trying to impress for a job or a graduate program or something. There's an unschooler in England who's in Oxford now. And so I'm getting to follow that. I've known him since he was 4. That's fun. That's fun. But school doesn't have a guarantee. School has some guarantees that we don't like to talk about, some guaranteed negatives. And I don't want to badmouth school too much. I personally really love school, and I have grandkids in school.
Yeah.
I think when unschooling is going smoothly, the guarantee is that the family is still making choices together and being together, making options together. And I think if it stops going smoothly, then the parents probably know that there are schools available if their kids would rather, or go early to university or get a job or something. If options are the habit of that family, I think they're in good shape to adjust if things aren't going well.
I'm married to a school teacher, so I often see the other side of things, and I respect my husband's job. But I remember when he's a mature age student, he was a businessman for many years. I got made redundant maybe 15, 16 years ago, then went back to uni to do his master's in teaching. He already had a Bachelor of Science. And for maybe a year and a half, we unschooled at home with all the kids, and he did his master's of teaching. And what I was really struck by was the atmosphere of learning within our home, that our kids, we were all learning, whether he was doing his coursework, whether we were following our passions, going on outings, that atmosphere of learning, that it was such a wonderful time in lots of ways. And my kids learned a lot from my husband going back to uni. Things like it's never too late to follow your dreams, your passions. He could have, I suppose, have been a school teacher at the beginning, but we got married as soon as we got out of uni, and he didn't go on to do his teacher training course. He did that in Wales on our travels. And so he got the opportunity when he got made redundant to think about his life again. And he went back to uni, and it really impressed my kids that the end point isn't necessarily 18 when people say, does unschooling work? And people have this idea of where their kids will be at 18. Will they be in a secure job? Will they be able to support themselves? And he went back to uni in his, I don't know, thinking late 40s maybe, and trying to work out how old we are now. And he did that. And he and my kids were always talking education, things they found out about, and having mutual respect for one another. And so, does unschooling work? Well, it depends what you want to happen, what do we want for our kids, but also on the time frame of it all. We've got our whole lives to do things, and our lives can look different at different places. But what unschooling has given us is that sense of adventure, self-confidence, curiosity, the idea that it's never too late to go out and learn something. And that's how how it's been shown in our family. Now, I also think that personality also plays a big part in unschooling. It's turned out these wonderful adults that we've unschooled, but sometimes our kids' personalities, it looks different in every child. And there's no guarantees there, because we're not rolling out kids on the production line. This is what we're going to do. We're going to unschool them. They're going to turn out this way at this time. And then this personality comes along and ruins all my plans. My had son, he was doing a Bachelor of Nursing. He got in all right to do uni. I thought, oh, look, you're in school. Your kids can go to uni. He's driving trucks in the mine at the moment. And his big delight is that he's been passed to drive the biggest truck in the mine. And he just works with his hands, and he loves the challenge, and that's what he wants to do. He could do nursing, and I thought he was going to be a good nurse. But yeah, one day I came home, oh, Mom, I don't think I'll go back to uni next year. And I'm thinking, oh, my unschooling story. You were a wonderful example for unschooling. And now you're going to drop out. And he worked in a supermarket for ages, became a manager at a supermarket, but that doesn't sound nearly as impressive as I unschooled my child. He followed his passions. He was a St. John ambulance officer. He won awards for his work. He became a nurse, and now he's a paramedic. And wow, that would have been a good story. And but it's not about us, is it? It's about them, and they've got their whole lives. And whatever they do, we support them through that and approve. Well, say approve. We can be so quick, not even by our words, but our attitudes, our body language, to disapprove of our children's choices. But I think what we have given them is the self-confidence there to go try new things, to take a gamble, to be curious and keep on and not do what is expected sometimes. And yeah, I don't know what he'll do next. Maybe he won't always be driving trucks, doing night shift, a younger person's job. And my children are in their 30s too. Well, not all of them. Some of them are in their 20s. But it's not a career for life. But I'm excited to see what the next stage will be.
Your
Yeah,
husband set a good
besides that,
example for changing jobs.
besides that, I love him very much. That I'm very proud of him. He's just such a lovely person, I think. And isn't that sometimes the output that we want?
That sounds wonderful. I think probably the job that he has now is more peaceful than nursing or medical, but he still has the knowledge he has. He's a truck driver who knows all of this stuff about medicine, emergency medicine, or that sort of thing, first aid. Another thing about individuality.
Yeah.
All of the people who work there have their own histories and their own knowledge. I think that's wonderful.
This whole talk about, is it a gamble and what's the outcome, and can we, do we dare unschool? Does it work? Like many other talks in unschooling, we also have to flip it a little bit and say, would you dare putting your children in school? Would you dare giving them over to someone else? You'd really have to trust that someone else. Do you trust in that school system? Isn't it always a gamble? I mean, if you choose to, I hope that you do that for good reason. There can be many good reasons to use the school systems, and there are schools out there that are better than other schools. I'm not here to judge anyone, but that too is a gamble. It's a big gamble, and lots of people come out with scars that would take a long time to heal. So, like you said, Sandra, are we saving up our money for tomorrow? What do we know about tomorrow? I think, of course, I do live as if I'm going to live another 50 years. But I also want to live for the here and now, and that's another main reason we unschool. I don't want to live for some fictional outcome, some idea about the future, very often fear-based idea about the future, thinking I have to do things I don't want to do because otherwise I will fail in life, because life is now. And if I'm happy and the people around me are happy and things are running smoothly and we're all growing and sharing, well, that's the life I want. And that's the life I want for my loved ones. So I don't need to work for a different outcome. I don't need to, oh God, my brain is tired. I need a word in English. I can't find it. sacrifice. I don't need to sacrifice my hours here and now, hoping that I'll gain something at the other end, because I want my hours here and now to be meaningful. And that's one of the big things for me about unschooling, maybe because I'm a cancer survivor, maybe just because I'm me. I don't know.
You can't go back and reclaim all those hours if you don't take advantage of them as your kids are growing up. And I found that what ended up more important to me than working towards academic outcomes was those connections with our kids, so that willing to spend time with them while I could, listen to them while I could, so that they became people that were, as I said, confident. And I think you said, Cecilia, earlier, children who know themselves, though I don't really believe that anybody knows themselves at 18. That way, that's a lifelong, people who, maybe what it's better to say is people who know that they're valuable and they're all right as they are. They don't have to change just because somebody from outside tells them they're not good enough. But I think that that's a good foundation, is that love and that respect, the listening, the time we spend doing all those things that are enjoyable together, and saying, hey, I think this is a valuable way to spend our days. I like sitting here we've talked about coffee before, Cecilia, having coffee around the table, having those discussions, and not, you must get on and learn your advanced math, because you can learn all those skills, academic, anytime. But as a parent, we can't go back and instill all that foundational love and confidence, respect into our children when it's good. We can, I think, work on our relationships as adults, but I think it's a wasted opportunity that we can't send our kids out into the world knowing that at least their family believes in them, loves them so much, has confidence in them, trusts that they're going to be okay out there in that world, and providing that safe refuge, because they're going to make mistakes. They're going to come to dead ends, and they come back. They know they've got somewhere to come back and recoup and be bathed in our love again, to go back out into the world and have new adventures. But that's what I ended up thinking as, well, it took a long time to get there, but for me, that was more important than the outcome of academics, except saying that all my kids who wanted to go to university got into university. So I don't think the academic side was at a disadvantage just because we spent a lot of time sitting around the table drinking coffee and talking about all kinds of things.
It's a better education in many ways. I love this conversation. I think it's been very interesting and very lovely to hang out with you women tonight, today, this morning, on different places on the planet. But yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation that we're having. I think this has been fun. Thank you very much for joining
Thank you for
me.
inviting me.
Thank
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Thank you for coming.